Should I stay or should I go? Covert Narcissist. There was a woman named Sarah who had been in a relationship with her partner, John, for several years. Over time, Sarah began to notice some troubling behavior in John. He would often belittle her, make her feel insignificant, and take credit for her achievements. Sarah began to suspect that John was a covert narcissist. At first, Sarah tried to ignore John's behavior and continued to hope that things would improve. However, as time went on, it became clear that John's behavior was not going to change. Sarah realized that she needed to take action to protect herself. The first step Sarah took was to educate herself about covert narcissism. She read books, articles, and watched videos about the topic. She learned that covert narcissists are masters of manipulation and often use tactics such as gaslighting to make their victims doubt themselves. Narcissism often stems from deep-seated insecurities and emotional wounds. In some cases, covert narcissism can develop as a result of childhood trauma or neglect. Children who are repeatedly invalidated or criticized by their caregivers may develop a false sense of superiority as a way to protect themselves from further emotional pain. This can lead to the development of narcissistic personality traits, such as an inflated sense of self-importance and a lack of empathy for others. Alternatively, a person may develop covert narcissism as a way to cope with ongoing feelings of inadequacy or inferiority. For example, if John experienced significant setbacks or failures in his life, he may have developed a narcissistic defense mechanism to protect himself from feeling like a failure. It's also worth noting that narcissism can be exacerbated by external factors such as societal pressures or cultural norms. For instance, in some cultures, success and achievement are highly valued, which can create an environment in which individuals may feel pressure to present themselves as successful and powerful. Ultimately, while there may be underlying factors that contribute to the development of narcissism, it's important to remember that individuals are responsible for their own behavior. Victims of narcissistic abuse should not feel obligated to excuse or justify their abuser's behavior, even if they have compassion for the underlying reasons behind it. Instead, their focus should be on protecting themselves and seeking support to heal from the effects of the abuse. Sarah began to focus on her own self-care. She made time for activities that brought her joy, such as painting and spending time with friends. She also sought support from a therapist who specialized in dealing with narcissistic abuse. As Sarah began to implement these strategies, she noticed a shift in John's behavior. He seemed less interested in controlling her and more interested in being supportive. Sarah realized that by taking care of herself and not allowing John's behavior to affect her, she had taken away his power. Again, it's important to note that narcissism is often the result of deep-seated insecurities and emotional wounds. Covert narcissists, in particular, may have experienced significant trauma in their past that has led them to develop a false sense of superiority as a coping mechanism. While it's not an excuse for their behavior, understanding the root cause of narcissism can help victims of abuse to have compassion for their abusers, without condoning their behavior. Covert narcissists often use a tactic called love bombing to manipulate and control their victims. Love bombing is a strategy in which the narcissist showers their target with excessive praise, attention, and affection in an effort to create a deep sense of attachment and dependence. In the case of John and Sarah, it's possible that John used love bombing tactics to draw Sarah into the relationship and keep her under his control. For example, in the early stages of their relationship, John may have been incredibly attentive, showering Sarah with compliments and affection. He may have made grand romantic gestures, such as expensive gifts or surprise trips, to create a sense of excitement and intimacy. However, as the relationship progressed, John's love-bombing behavior may have become more intermittent or conditional. He may have withdrawn affection or praise when Sarah didn't meet his expectations or challenged his behavior. This type of behavior can create a cycle of emotional highs and lows, leaving the victim confused and unsure of their own feelings. It's important to note that love bombing is not always a deliberate or conscious tactic on the part of the narcissist. In some cases, the narcissist may genuinely believe that they are deeply in love with their target and may be unaware of their own manipulative behavior. Regardless of whether love bombing is intentional or not, it's important for victims of narcissistic abuse to recognize the behavior for what it is: a manipulation tactic designed to create dependency and control. By being aware of these tactics, victims can begin to break free from the cycle of abuse and take steps to protect themselves from further harm. In addition to love bombing, covert narcissists often use a tactic called gaslighting to further manipulate and control their victims. Gaslighting is a form of psychological abuse in which the abuser creates doubt in the victim's mind about their own perceptions and memories. For example, John may have made Sarah doubt her own sanity or sense of reality by telling her that she was overreacting or imagining things that he had said or done. He may have denied events or conversations that Sarah distinctly remembers, causing her to question her own memory. Over time, gaslighting can erode a victim's sense of self and create a sense of confusion and self-doubt. Victims may begin to question their own sanity, perception, or memory, and become more reliant on the narcissist for validation and guidance. It's important to recognize that gaslighting is a deliberate and insidious tactic that is designed to undermine a victim's sense of self and make them more vulnerable to manipulation. Victims of gaslighting may feel as though they are losing their grip on reality or experiencing a kind of psychological torture. If you suspect that you are experiencing gaslighting in a relationship, it's important to seek support from a trusted friend, family member, or mental health professional. By sharing your experiences with others and receiving validation for your perceptions, you can begin to rebuild your sense of self and take steps to protect yourself from further harm. After learning about covert narcissism and realizing that John was likely a narcissist, Sarah faced a difficult decision: stay in the relationship or leave. Both choices have potential outcomes that are worth considering. If Sarah chose to stay in the relationship, she would need to establish clear boundaries and make a concerted effort to protect herself from John's manipulative tactics. This might involve limiting contact with John or being very explicit about what behaviors she will not tolerate. It could also mean continuing to seek support from a therapist to help her navigate the complexities of the relationship. In some cases, staying in the relationship with a narcissist can be a viable option if the narcissist is willing to acknowledge their behavior and work towards change. However, it's important to note that true change is often difficult for narcissists, and victims of narcissistic abuse should not put themselves in harm's way by continuing to tolerate abusive behavior. On the other hand, if Sarah chose to leave the relationship, she would be giving up any hope of salvaging the relationship and would need to face the difficult process of healing from the effects of the abuse. This might involve seeking out support groups or individual therapy to process her feelings and learn coping skills. While leaving a narcissistic relationship can be incredibly challenging, it also has the potential to be empowering and liberating. Victims of narcissistic abuse often experience a profound sense of relief and freedom when they finally extricate themselves from the toxic cycle of control and manipulation. Ultimately, the decision to stay or leave a narcissistic relationship is deeply personal and should be made based on what feels safest and most empowering for the victim. Thinking about all of this, Sarah had a choice to make. She knows that dealing with a covert narcissist requires a combination of education, self-care, and professional support. By not allowing the narcissist's behavior to affect them and focusing on their own well-being, victims of narcissistic abuse can break free from the cycle of control and manipulation. On the other hand, she could just leave the relationship. Although it may be hard, her emotional well-being is much more important. What was her choice?